This video is about coronavirus and money. Now, this is a really important video. I've been wanting to make it for a long time because huge, historic things are happening in the world of money here. Even when I was working as a money trader in the 2008 crisis, nothing ever happened of this speed. Now, what's happening in the world of money here is going to dominate the economy for the next few years, quite possibly even the next few decades. It's going to affect you, it's going to affect your family's financial position. So if you want to understand what's going to happen in the economy going forward, you go watch this video. Now, so far in this crisis, most workers have had their incomes relatively protected. In this country, the UK, most workers are still working and getting their regular incomes. Of those who can't work, the majority are being supported by government furlough and self-employment schemes. Now, as many as 5.5 million workers have fallen through the gaps of those schemes and are getting almost no income support. Now, those guys already are feeling the pain of this financial crisis. But what we're going to explain in this video is how even if your income is being supported, the changes in the world of money behind the scenes are going to affect your financial position going forward. Now we're going to explain how. Now, the biggest changes have been happening in the world of government and central banks. Now, this is happening all over the world, but in the UK, the central bank, the Bank of England, has committed to printing £300 billion. £300 billion is an enormous amount of money. It's £4,500 for every single man, woman, and child in the country. It's more than 3 times the net worth of Jeff Bezos, the world's richest man. Now, when such a huge amount of money gets printed and put into the economy, it's really important we understand 3 things about it. 1, how does it work? So we're going to talk about exactly what money printing is. 2, where does the money go? And 3, where does the money end up? Now, those last 2 things, they may sound similar, but they're actually crucially different. And we're going to explain why. Okay, so number 1, how does this new money work? So I think a lot of people are confused by the concept of money printing. It's important to understand that this £300 billion is brand new money created by the central bank. Now, if that's confusing to you, you just need to understand that the central bank has the legal right to print or create brand new money. Now, we say print money to give the visual idea of a printing press printing out new banknotes. But in reality, nowadays, most money is electronic. So what that means in practice is that the Bank of England is allowed to simply credit its own account with new money. Okay, so this is brand new money. It doesn't come from anyone. It's not raised through taxes. It's simply created by the Bank of England. When that money gets poured into the system, we need to understand who's going to get it. And the next question, where does it go? Now, most of this money is getting lent from the Bank of England to the government. Now, even though this is brand newly created money and the Bank of England is a government institution, the government still has to borrow it from the Bank of England. This creates a debt which legally the government has to pay back. For this reason, government debt has increased hugely already in this crisis. And just recently, UK government debt has gone above 100% of GDP for the first time in over 50 years. So what does the government then do with this money? Well, the government gives most of it to furloughed workers and other workers who can't get their income during the coronavirus crisis. This brings us to part 3. Where does the money end up? Now, we know the money is being paid to furloughed workers. But if we look at the actual situation of furloughed workers, they're actually receiving less income than they were before the crisis happened. This is because even though they're receiving government income support, it's only 80% of their original wages, and their original wages are no longer coming in. So this creates a mystery. We know that a lot of new money is coming into the economy, and we know that ultimately it's going to the furloughed workers, but the furloughed workers are no richer than they were before. So where's the money going? That brings us to question number 3. Where does the money end up? Now, we know the money is being paid to the furloughed workers, but the furloughed workers have less money than they had before the coronavirus crisis because they've lost the wages that they were originally being paid. If we want to know who ends up with the money, we need to find out who has those wages. Where have the wages gone that used to be paid to the workers? So if we want to understand, we have to follow this cash flow back through the system. Now, normally wages get paid to the workers through the companies. But if we look at the companies, we'll find that most of these companies are struggling as well because customers have simply stopped coming to their stores and stopped buying their stuff. So we need to follow the cash flow back one step further to the customers. Now, the customers in this crisis have dropped their spending massively. For that reason, many of these customers are holding more money in their pockets. That money is not going to the companies, which means the wages have stopped. So the people who are holding more money, the net benefiters of the new money being put into the system, are actually the customers. Now, when I say that, you're probably thinking, wait a minute, I'm a customer. Where's my £4,500 per man, woman and child? And that would be a good question. The reason why you might not be holding £4,500 more than you were before is because not all customers are created equal. Remember, the reason that customers have more money now than they had before the crisis is because they've cut their spending. But it's not all spending that has cut here. Spending on essentials such as rent, mortgage, food and bills still has to be paid. So if most of your spending is on those essentials, your spending won't have fallen by much. The spending that has fallen is on non-essentials and luxuries. So see here, the customers who are saving the most money are the ones who have very high spending on non-essentials and luxuries. Well, you're probably starting to see where I'm going with this. Who spends a lot of money on luxuries? The customers who are accumulating money during this crisis are the rich. Now, I wrote an article predicting this back in March, explaining how rich people, because they would cut their spending, would accumulate savings and money during this crisis. Since then, data has come out from a lot of institutions, including the IPPR in the UK, demonstrating clearly that rich people have been accumulating money during this crisis because their spending has reduced so much. It's interesting to compare here the situation of a furloughed worker with a richer person in the economy. Furloughed workers have lost their income, which comes from services jobs, but they've kept most of their spending, which is largely on essentials like rent and bills. Richer workers, who tend to work in office jobs and can work from home, have kept their incomes, whereas their spending, which is largely on luxuries, has collapsed. It's important to understand the significance it has on the economy when the rich people stop spending. Now, in normal times, rich people have very high spending, much higher than ordinary workers. Because that spending goes to companies which employ workers, it contributes to wages being paid. This is really important because ordinary workers have to pay bills, rent, food. When they pay that money, a lot of that money ends up going to the owners of the houses and the owners of the corporations, who are themselves the rich. So as you can see in this diagram, in a normal situation, the spending of the rich goes to the workers, and when the workers pay their rent, bills and food, it goes back to the rich. The money flows around in a circle. So what happens when the rich suddenly stop spending? Well, that money was driving the wages for ordinary workers. Suddenly, the workers' wages have disappeared. But they still have to pay the rent, they still have to pay the mortgage, they still have to pay the bills. How are they going to do that with no income? It's a massive problem. And if nothing happens, some of these guys, they could become homeless, they could even not even get food on the table. So it's no surprise that in this emergency situation, the government and the Bank of England stepped in with the furlough scheme. This provides a substitute income to ordinary workers who have lost their wages. It's important to realise that at this point, from the perspective of the worker, things actually look quite similar to how they did pre-crisis. They've got an income, they've got their expenditure. Their income's a little bit less, they have to save a little bit. But from their perspective, the situation is largely unchanged. But look at what is happening outside in the system. Previously, the money was going around in a circle. What's happening now? The money gets printed by the Bank of England. It goes to the worker. The worker pays their bills, it goes to the rich. And then it just stays there because the rich are not spending their money anymore. That means money piles up with the rich and accumulates. And what happens with the government? They accumulate debt. Okay, so we've learned that during the COVID crisis, most people's financial situation appears relatively unchanged. However, behind the scenes, the government is accumulating big piles of debt and the rich are accumulating big piles of money. The next question is, why does that matter? Well, the easier part of that question is to talk about why big government debt could affect you. Those of you who are old enough to remember 2008 will remember at that time too, government debt increased and the government came in and used that to enforce austerity. Now that impacted a lot of people. It had a lot of effects in many, many different ways. That could happen again if government debt increases again. Now, I'm not a politician, I'm not a political forecaster, I'm an economic forecaster. I can't tell you if austerity will happen again. But what I want to talk about is those big piles of money stacking up in rich people's bank accounts. How's that going to affect you? So what does it mean if the rich get richer? I mean, if they just stack the money in their bank account, it's probably not a problem, right? Personally, I worked in the finance industry for a long time. I managed money for the rich. I got involved in understanding how they invest their money. Through that, I made some money myself. I got involved in investing myself. I know a little bit about what the rich do when money starts piling up in their bank account. Number one, they buy houses. But it's not just houses they buy. They buy stocks, they buy shares, they buy bonds, they buy gold. To be honest, they buy everything. Now, let's look at what happened last time the government used money printing to solve a financial crisis. We can look back to the 2008 crisis. In many ways, that was similar. That time too, the Bank of England printed a huge amount of money to try and deal with an economic crisis. What happened then? Well, within 6 years, stock prices in London had doubled. Within 3 years, the gold price was up 150%. And within 10 years of the crisis, London house prices had doubled. What does that mean? Well, in the 20 years since 2000, through that period of crisis and rising house prices, the percentage of young people who've been able to afford a home in this country has fallen from 65 to 27%. What will it mean if house prices double again? It will mean that realistically, people who are from a family that doesn't have a home now will probably never own housing. It means that those people will be locked out of the housing market forever. It means that young people will find it more difficult to get the security of a home to raise a family. And at the same time as that's happening, stock prices are going to go up, gold prices are going to go up, the rich are going to get richer than ever before. But it's not just stocks and shares and housing that these guys are going to buy. They'll be in the shops too, and they'll have a lot more money to push those prices up. It's very likely that over the next few years, we're going to see the prices of a lot of things increase. At the same time, what's going to happen to wages? Well, we've already seen the unemployment rate double in this country. And that's in spite of a furlough scheme encouraging firms to keep jobs on. There's currently 9 million workers on that furlough scheme. And when that starts to be wrapped up, a lot of those workers will probably be pushed into unemployment. With unemployment going up and up and up, it's very likely that just as house prices and prices in the shops are rising, wages will stay low. Okay, so what can we do? We know that under the current situation, the rich are going to get richer while wages fall, house prices rise, and shop prices increase. It's going to make housing unaffordable and it's going to drop living conditions for regular people. Can it be fixed? Well, personally, I think that it can. If you go back and look at this slide explaining the problem, we can see what's happening. Money currently is flowing from the government to the rich, leaving the government with big piles of debt and the rich with big piles of money. We can actually fix this with one simple arrow on this diagram. If we start money moving back around the system away from the rich, no more cash piles for the rich, no more debt for the government. In my opinion, we need to find ways to tax the truly rich in our society by taxing wealth rather than just income. This will draw money from the wealthiest people in our society, the people who get their income from owning assets rather than working. Ultimately, we need to find a way to make the richest in our society contribute to fixing this crisis rather than simply profiting from it. Otherwise, financial security is going to move out of the reach of our kids. Thank you for watching. This is a message which is really important to me. If you think it's important too, share it with your friends, share it with your family. If you want to know more about me, you can see my Twitter and my website in the description. Come back here for more videos. Okay, thanks again.